streaming, actually, I might just bring up the YouTube, actually, while we're doing this.
Hello, Australia, and welcome to BAP Nights. We're doing a special BAP presentation tonight in order to test our technology capabilities. So tonight's episode won't be so much about politics, but more about writing the zeitgeist. So joining me tonight is Jason, regular BAPeteer, and along with Jason and Dean and myself, we went and saw a movie last night, didn't we? Hello? Jason, are you there?
Can you hear me, is that right?
Now I can hear you because I just accidentally muted you, which I shouldn't have done. Sorry, listeners, I was cutting out the intro music and I also cut out Jason's comments. Now, some people might think, well, we're not really losing much there, but I like to bounce my sort of wit and repartee off Jason, so it's a necessary component.
That's okay. I'm looking at our YouTube channel and there's no one watching, so it's okay.
Okay, so no one's going to notice.
No one's even going to notice.
So, as I was saying, and probably which you replied to but no one heard, we did see a movie last night, didn't we?
We did. We saw War for the Planet of the Apes.
I was wondering what the preceding or post verb descriptor of the Planet of the Apes was.
It's and to lead off, I was so disappointed.
So are you familiar with Planet of the Apes canon?
I'm very familiar with the new series, the more recent series. I think Dean was much more familiar with the old movies, and I've seen them at some point, but not for a long time. But the new series, I had high hopes for this movie because the previous two movies were quite good.
Yeah, I must admit, I didn't enjoy the first one in this incarnation. The second one was a bit better. That was more actiony from what I recall. And this one seemed to be the Fury Road of Planet of the Apes version, the long journey.
I think that's doing it. Calling it Fury Road is doing a lot of work. I mean, that's a really benign comparison, I think.
Yeah, maybe a bit unfair, but it was very
unfair
much
on Fury Road. Yeah.
In terms of the way it was presented in the trailers, it seeming like it was going to be a non-stop action romp, which wasn't necessarily what I was going there for, but that's what I assumed it was going to be. And it wasn't so much that. There was not a constant Woody Harrelson, or the Colonel as he's known, and Caesar joust through the whole movie. It's not about that at all. No,
not at all. And I knew there was going to be. I knew it was action-packed at the beginning and then action-packed at the end. I knew there was a sort of a fairly a journey-filled segment through the middle of the movie, but I just found it there were various segments of it that just were really poorly executed.
Yes, I agree.
Very disappointing. So the character acting, I had high hopes because Andy Serkis, I think, does a fantastic job normally. But the writing was just terrible. It was absolutely abysmal.
Now, who is Andy Serkis?
Andy Serkis was doing all the motion capture for Caesar.
Right, okay.
So he's done that for the last two movies as well.
Yeah.
But the writing was terrible. There was that whole Monty Python-esque kind of finish to it, where the two bands of humans. I tried to explain this to my partner, and I was explaining it as you had the bad humans and the really bad humans, and the really bad humans were waiting to do combat with the bad humans, and basically the humans ran in to do battle with each other, and one side got blown up, and then the other side got wiped out by an avalanche.
Yeah,
that was it.
That did seem a bit much.
There was so much Deus Ex Machina in there that it was just really, it was quite ridiculous. It was clearly things that were inserted simply for the plot development, and quite clumsily slow. There was no real artifice to it at all. It was.
Yeah, and I think they went too hard on trying to tie the timeline in so this movie would flow into the Charlton Heston original, which I thought, but it's a very clumsy tie-in because you're not allowing enough time for what ends up being the reality of the original Planet of the Apes. When we see them, in terms of the War of the Planet of the Apes is set 15 years since the simian flu has gone past, and you see the apes at a certain level of development,
Yeah.
and where they've tied themselves into having a short timeline is one of the characters they introduced, one of the human characters was Nova, who as a child, but she's an adult in the Charlton Heston, which only allows for 20 odd years to pass.
Where in the Charlton Heston Planet of the Apes was set many, many hundreds of years in the future, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and the apes are very advanced. They all can speak, which at the moment they can't all do, and they have formed quite complex societal communities.
Yeah.
And the humans have really regressed to a cattle state, which so
Or they're beginning to regress to that cattle state. Yeah. Um, I just didn't find it believable at all when the colonel started going all apocalypse now and executing people. I just didn't believe that he had a band of people that would follow him down that route, and there was just so much clumsy sort of story development.
yeah.
Clearly, they needed the apes to participate in this final battle, so they had a fuel tank there that was quite ready to be exploded by someone, but apparently every helicopter that was flying in couldn't hit it. It was there were far too many glaring plot holes. And yeah,
there was something little pieces that I did enjoy. So I did enjoy the motivation for the Colonel as to why he was taking the actions he was. I thought that was quite well crafted.
I thought the comic relief with the bad ape guy was quite good.
But in the end, was the bad ape necessary? You know, he is the Jar Jar Binks of this.
He was, but he was a lot more I don't know, sympathetic than any Jar Jar Binks interpretation.
I think if this had been a good movie, you would have found that character annoying. But because the movie was quite flat, that character worked.
Did you find it just? I mean, I think the point at which I started to diverge from the movie and just get a little bit upset with it was when they were supposedly following this crack group of human troops, this special forces group, and they were following them along the beach, well within sight of them on horseback, and no one bothered to look back and see that they were getting followed by a bunch of apes.
I didn't pay too much attention to that necessarily.
No, I think I started looking for real issues at that point. I started going, well, this is ridiculous now. This is getting a bit pointless.
I was more confused how they went from rainforest to snow in a very short distance.
Well, they were in northern California, which is quite heavily forested up towards the Oregon sort of area, and then of course they headed into the Rockies where there's definitely snow.
Yeah.
I didn't have so much a problem with that, but yeah, I guess I also didn't think apes would be quite comfortable just rolling around in snow without clothing and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
No, I didn't think their fur would necessarily be that effective.
Are we being too critical, Franco? Is that what the problem is here? I think perhaps we're being a little bit too critical, but
well, fortunately for me, I didn't go in expecting a lot. As I said, I've seen the previous two movies and I thought, meh, they're all right. So I didn't go in there with that much in the way of expectations. So to me, I wasn't disappointed because I didn't expect much. I know Dean was a bit disappointed because I think he was hoping for a lot more.
Yeah, we were having a bit of a snipe at the movie during it, talking amongst ourselves. The second movie was quite good, and then I'd heard reviews about this one, and the reviews were very positive. So I went into it perhaps with far too higher expectations for it.
Mm.
Yeah,
I think the Moses ending was a bit annoying.
The Moses ending?
Yes. So, you know, they travelled for 40 years.
Oh, of course.
And then they made it to the paradise, but he wasn't allowed to enjoy it. He had to die.
Because he died immediately. Yeah.
Yes.
He hung in there just long enough. Of course.
It's not uncommon for American filmmaking to have subliminal Bible references to it. It seems to appeal to American audiences.
Yeah, it was a little bit too heavy-handed, though. There was no subtlety to it at all.
No.
I mean, and people might say, well, should you be expecting this much from a movie that has apes as the main protagonists? But Yeah, we should.
Well, yeah. Well, if you've seen
The
the original
second,
Planet of the Apes, yes, you do expect a lot more because,
yeah,
I mean, I remember growing up with and seeing the original, and then obviously there's so many cultural reference or comedic cultural references to Planet of the Apes that you don't sort of think about it as a great movie. But I actually went and rewatched it not too long ago, the last couple of years. I think it was on TV, and yes, in some respects, it does have some of the campy elements of the late '60s, early '70s filmmaking. But if you get past the sort of, to some extent, the prosthetics they're wearing, it's quite clever. I felt that sort of
I might
exploration.
have to go back and I haven't seen it in many years, but I thought even with this series, the second movie was excellent. The second movie was really well done, and that kind of led me to believe that they could easily pull this third one off, but they didn't do it. But I mean, I noticed that they were spending a lot of time getting in a lot of references to the original movie and even to the animated series, like the section where they had the apes all crucified on those crosses.
Oh,
That was specifically a reference back to the animated series where they constantly had people and apes being crucified on those crosses and stuff.
I didn't realize there was an animated series. So
There's an animated series which is possibly even darker than the actual movies. Yeah.
is that a recent?
No, that's really old.
Okay.
If you go and check it out, you'll see it's very old. It was probably done in the 70s as well.
Okay, but was that for adults or for children?
More for adults.
Okay.
More for adults. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was sort of disappointed.
So I won't be recommending that people run to the movies to see this one. I think you'll be fine on
not at
watching
all.
on Netflix when it does come
But,
out.
but perhaps there's something we can recommend, and that's the latest Dan Carlin
I was
history.
just about to ask you about that. So yes, Stan Cullen has released a new podcast entitled "Holocaust of the Celtics," I believe.
I'm an hour into it, and in typical fashion, it's brilliant. It's fantastic stuff. I mean, it was interesting because I actually heard I was looking on Twitter, and you've listened to a fair few Chapo Trap House episodes now, haven't you?
I have, yes.
Have you heard the
another
Australian-
wonderful podcast? So
Yeah.
definitely
Have you
worth
heard-
listening to. Yep.
Have you heard the Australian guest Matt Brady when he came on?
Mm,
You haven't heard any episodes? He's an Australian guy. I don't know what the connection is, but anyway, he tweeted out that Hardcore History had popped up with another episode as well, and one of the Trap House guys wrote back and said, "Hey, I've listened to an hour of it, but I can't get into it." And basically, we were all talking amongst ourselves, saying how fucking brilliant Dan Carlin is at telling a story, because that's essentially what he does. He sort of investigates his historic sort of eras and tells them in his fantastic narrative fashion that is really compelling, I find.
yeah, well, he gives depth to the facts. So, a lot of the time when you're reading or watching about history, it's very fact-orientated, just a statement of facts, where he gives colour and context around those facts, what people might be going through under those conditions or experiences, what some of the economic situations are revolving around those, and what may have contributed to those historic events.
And he would talk about the historian that may have recorded this particular detail and what their life was, and provide some colour about the historian, some context around that person, so that you can understand why they might have written in this fashion, or why this history might be presented in this way. Yeah, it's a 6-hour episode, this new one. It's just come out.
Is it a self-contained episode, or is it part one of...
He actually noted on Twitter, he was talking about it and said, well, I don't know, I produced it and then I could have split it into 3-hour episodes, but he thought I'll just put it out as one because it fits together as one cogent episode. So, but the amount of effort he puts into these things, I'm hoping he's making decent money out of it.
I think he would be by this stage. I mean, he is quite well known.
Well, perhaps, but it's not like either you or I are giving him any money, are we?
We don't need to tell the audience that.
Well, I mean, he puts it out there for free. It's crazy. The quality of work that he's doing, and he's putting it out there for free.
This is true, but yeah. For every for every one cheapskate like us, there's probably other people giving, five,
I,
10, 50, $100, So
I really hope so, because it's pretty good stuff.
well,
It's pretty good
he
stuff.
must be, because he continues to do it. So, and
Yeah.
as you said, the amount of work he must put into, we must be talking hundreds of hours of research to
Yeah.
get these pull these
And then
episodes together.
and to put a 6-hour episode together, I dare say he's probably doing at least 4 or 5 times that of actual recording time.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. There was some commentary around his Common Sense political podcast as well.
Really? Well, I've almost given up on his Common Sense. I found
Well, he
he's
doesn't-
gone off the deep end and just become quite boring and irrelevant, some of his comments.
He doesn't put out too much in that way anyway. But and when it comes out, he tends to have a very standoffish kind of observational kind of perspective on things. So he's not really presenting much new, but I find his input fairly interesting anyway.
I did in the past, but yeah, I think obviously he's really taken the foot off the pedal when in regards to Common Sense, and that makes sense. He's probably putting all his time and attention into the hardcore history, which is what makes him the money. So yeah, I just find his latest Common Sense over the last 18 months, repetitive and just.
Well, he doesn't
Really
like to.
anymore.
Yeah, he doesn't like to draw too many conclusions or present a really hard opinion on things too often, because he's got that whole, I guess, a slightly libertarian kind of thing where everyone has a valid point of perspective on it. So he doesn't like to discount anyone's perspective in some ways. So
yeah, I think the last enjoyable episode that I can recall of hardcore history was the Poking the Bear episode, when he talked about.
You mean Common Sense one? Yeah.
Yeah, Common Sense. Sorry. When there was tensions between Ukraine and Moscow, and by proxy America.
Yeah.
And he was explaining why the Russians would be so defensive about.
Actually, that was a pretty good episode.
And that's what I really used to enjoy about Common Sense, was that he would sort of dissect these goings on in the world and give you a bit of context and an alternative view of why the main protagonists would be behaving in certain ways.
Yeah, and he actually had a very good perspective on that particular one. But yeah, I guess he's fallen into the trap of just sort of commenting on typical Donald Trump sort of stuff.
Yeah.
These days, which you're getting. I don't think he has anything particularly fresh to present on that kind of thing that no one else is already putting out there.
And I mean,
I can't really blame him for that.
I mean, yeah, that's quite right. Definitely over the last 12 months, all he's talked about is, he covered the sort of the topics of why America voted for Donald Trump. And because I'm obviously the amount of podcasts I listen to, which are covering that general topic to death, his comments seem rather shallow on it now, since you get from the sources I draw upon are quite on the mark and deep and
it's
insightful.
I can't really fault him that he's not bringing anything new to that kind of party, because I don't think anyone else is either. Just about everyone got caught off guard by Trump getting elected, and now everyone's commenting about it after the fact, but no one's got anything particularly new to bring to it.
While we're speaking of podcasts, I've returned to one of your favourites, the Denzel Washington is the greatest actor ever, period. Because the work I'm doing at the moment at work allows me to listen to podcasts at the same time. And geez, there's some really good content on that show.
So yeah, I mean, we went through most of those episodes. I think there's at some point in towards the end of the run where W. Kamau Bell disappears off the podcast, and it's just the other guy.
Yeah.
But they do get the big ticket Denzel movies out while both of them are commenting on it, and they have an excellent sort of rapport.
Yes.
And they have it's a really funny kind of way of assessing Denzel Washington movies. It's brilliant.
Well, I mean, they managed to pump out 150 episodes.
I know.
Around the topic of Denzel Washington, and obviously not every episode is that focused. Like the one I listened to today was when they had Vincent D'Onofrio. Is that his name? I can't pronounce it. The guy.
Vincent D'Onofrio.
D'Onofrio, yeah, and that was quite a good episode. And
they had him on it.
Yeah, it was one of the
Oh God, I don't know if
one of the
I
last
don't
10
know.
episodes. And they talked a lot more about Vincent's career. And I didn't realize that Vincent, what is it again? D'Onofrio?
Yeah, Vincent D'Onofrio. Yeah,
D'Onofrio was, he was Gomer Pyle on Stanley Kubrick's.
yeah, yeah,
I didn't realize that was him.
yeah. There was
Well, he
a
wasn't Gomer Pyle, so I forget what the name of the character was,
yeah,
but
they call it. I think
they called him
the
Gomer
drill
Pyle.
sergeant called it Gomer Pyle at one stage,
Yeah.
but he was the guy that went off the deep end
Yes.
and started shooting people up. Yeah, um, he was brought onto that movie because he was a friend with Matthew Modine, who was the top line, the main sort of actor in that
That's right.
movie, and he got brought in after the fact and got given that role because apparently he's such a brilliant sort of character actor and stuff like that. So um, yeah, he's pretty good. I'm gonna have to go and check that episode out that has him. I don't remember we listening to that one before, and I listened to a lot of those Denzel podcasts.
No, I recommend it. And actually, Vincent talks a lot about his method
Was
character
he in a
acting.
movie? Was he in a movie with Denzel?
Yeah, he was in the Magnificent Seven.
Oh, of course. Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
he also talks about how he was in Men in Black and how he came up with, the voice and the walking style of the main villain.
Yeah, yeah. That's my first thing. That's my first memory of Vincent D'Onofrio was in Men in Black.
So
I
my,
remember
e- e-
talking about that as well.
even though I've obviously seen Vincent in many other movies, I never thought of him as a singular actor. And my first, the time I actually came to know him as a person with a name was in CSI, not CSI, sorry, Law and Order: Criminal Minds.
Yeah, I never watched much of that at all, but I do remember he sort of slipped away from movies and was doing that kind of work for a while.
Yeah,
Um, it wasn't terrible. He was playing, one of those strangely gifted, um, kind of inspectors, but
yeah,
clearly not able to relate with regular people very easily.
yeah. He was a troubled savant.
Yeah, okay, that sounds right.
But he did talk about how he came up with portraying Kingpin in Daredevil, or Fisk.
That's right. That was the one I forgot about. Yeah, he's Kingpin, and he does that really well. Actually,
Indeed,
plays a pretty good role that one.
because obviously in the comics, Kingpin's like 9 foot, and obviously there's not any 9 foot humans walking around the place. So, but his ability to, method act that sort of physical, intense, huge presence was amazing.
Daredevil's disappeared. Is that coming back again? Because that seems to have disappeared for a long time. It's been off for more than
Well, aren't they coming back as the well, not Justice League, the other as the aren't they all
Cage
Luke Cage, Jessica
and
Jones,
Jessica Jones. Yeah.
Iron Fist? Aren't they coming back in a series altogether?
Oh, quite
Defenders,
possibly.
is it? Oh, I forget the name.
Yeah,
The collective name of it.
you're probably right, actually. But I haven't watched any Iron Fist because I heard that was complete rubbish. That one.
It's watchable. It's if you've got nothing better to
Okay.
do.
Well, at the moment, I'm currently revisiting some old Game of Thrones episodes.
Yes, we did start watching some of the classic first season episodes, and wow,
Yeah.
how far they've come since those times.
Well, I've just finished watching the first season again, so
Well,
it's amazing how many callbacks to the first season, to elements that came out in the first season, are popping up in that in the latest season. Actually, I'm quite
indeed,
surprised.
the Valerian dagger that seems to have come up, which I don't what is the actual history behind that? Obviously, I know it was part of the plot to kill Bran.
Yeah, so the Valerian dagger popped up. It was a dagger that an assassin that went in to kill Bran after he'd already fallen from the tower and lost the use of his legs, but because he was still alive, and he'd witnessed the antics of Cersei and Jaime Lannister. Um, Apparently, it was Joffrey that sent someone to kill him. So anyway, an assassin was sent to kill him with that very expensive dagger, and that the assassin got killed
One of the direwolves, I believe.
by Bran's direwolf, and then the dagger sort of disappeared. Essentially, it popped up again because they were quite right. That was actually the question of the ownership of that dagger was pretty much what kicked off the war between the Starks and the Lannisters,
Mm.
because everyone essentially started getting motivated off that once they knew that it was probably the Lannisters that had tried to kill him. So um, it all started getting accelerated from there. And then essentially the dagger disappeared for 5 seasons and then popped back up just recently when it was given back to Bran.
From Littlefinger.
Um, but it was interesting watching these old episodes, seeing old Renly there and all these characters that have long since died. I mean, there was a lot happened in that first season.
Mm.
It almost seems like having watched the first season again and seeing how much happened in that first season, they actually slowed the pace down through seasons 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's not as many breasts going through as there was in season
Oh,
one.
that was right. Yeah, the first season there was definitely lots of breasts and butt.
Yes, lots of nudity, lots of sex scenes, and
Yeah,
now they've sort of tapered off from that, and obviously it's not as necessary with
I think
the.
there hasn't been anything like that in the most recent season, has there? It's
There
pretty
was
much been down to business.
there was a tender scene between Grey Worm and
Oh, that's right.
the Queen's
that's right,
advisor. So, but yeah, that's about
yeah.
as seamy as it got.
Lysandre, yeah.
Yes, there was a little bit of incest play with Cersei and Jaime.
Oh, there was, but you didn't. They don't bother going into graphic detail with them anymore.
No. And a little bit of foreplay between Yara and I forget her name.
Which was cut very short.
Yes.
Yeah, I know the one, the Dawn lady.
Yes.
That was cut very, very short.
Finally, I'm just trying to think. Oh, you'll be interested to know that I've started watching season 2 of Fear the Walking Dead.
Okay.
So
Season 2. They're up to season 3 now, aren't they?
oh, you know better than I.
You sure?
I believe so.
No, well, I can't remember what season it is. I mean, I'm up to date with it. I just can't remember whether it's because they split the seasons up now. They do like 2 half seasons every year. So
Yeah.
it's hard to know which portion of the season you're up with because they take a 12-week break in between each half season. So where are you up to now? They're in Mexico?
No, I'm 1.5 episodes in. So basically, I'm up to the part where they've arrived on an island with seemingly survivalists.
Oh, okay. Now what happens there? That's a long way back.
Yeah.
I think they there's an interesting thing, and you may want to check this out because they come across a couple of survivors that were on an aircraft that crashed into the ocean.
I haven't got to that part yet.
Okay. The interesting thing about that is that the story of that aircraft is told in a web series that's on YouTube.
Oh, yes. I remember you saying it was like an 8-piece webisode.
A 10 episode series, each of about like 2 minutes kind of thing. So I think it comes out to be like a 25-minute duration of what happens on that plane.
Ah, now was that produced by AMC or by a third party?
Yeah, it was all the same the same actors and everything. That was quite well produced. There's another web series which is I can't remember if those actors actually pop up in the series at all, which is told of someone getting out of LA and getting down towards the Mexican border as well or something, but that didn't. It was a pretty interesting web series, but I don't think it actually had any connection to the series as a whole. But the aircraft one definitely does.
Oh, okay. I will definitely keep an eye out for it.
We're checking out for that one.
All right, Jason. I think that's a wrap for tonight's little BAP night experiment.
No worries. I'm glad we've proven this Skype thing works, actually. This will be handy.
I will definitely have to go back and listen. All right, I'm going to end the show. Just hold on the line while I do that.
No worries.